Hello cello players, we will be working on Minuet in C, the first two lines from your Suzuki book today. Minuet in C is the first of many minuets that you will have in your Suzuki book, and something that they have in common is the bowing that you have in the first measure. It has a hooked bow with a down, up, up pattern. So what you're going to try to do is make sure we have all three quarter notes, right? Do, do, do. Make sure all three are the same length. All right, while I'm making all three notes the same speed, I'm not using the same amount of bow. I'm getting to the tip on my down bow so that I have plenty of bow left for my two ups. So I go whole, half, half of my bow, even though all three notes are the same speed. I'm going to cycle that bowing pattern on my open D a couple times to make sure that we're in that hooked bow spirit. Please join me. Ready, and go. Up, up. One more. All right, so practice that hook bowing separately from the piece. Put it in a scale. Do anything to get that bow pattern kind of second nature for your arm. Next, I'm going to talk about the rhythm that's in measures 2 and measure 4. So it's a do, do, day, do. So I'm going to play that rhythm. And now watch how much bow I'm using. Notice how I'm using big full bows for the quarter notes for do, do, day, do, because that will help me with my rhythm. All right, if I'm using a longer bow on that quarter note, I'm less likely to rush it. So I'm going to cycle that rhythm through a few times. Please join me on an open D. Ready, and go. Do, do, day, do. One more. Next, I'm going to add the notes in measure 4. I'm going to slow that rhythm down just a little bit. The reason I'm doing measure 4 is that it ends on a 4th finger C on my G string. And C is a very important note in this minuet. It's in its name, Minuet in C. That means that C is do. So that's a note that's very important to play in tune. So we're going to practice that bowing pattern we just did while adding the notes of measure 4, like this. Okay, let's try that 3 times. Do, do, day, do. Make sure your elbow's up high enough to reach that C. 2 more. Do, do, day, do. And 1 more. Do, do, day, do. All right, we have one more bowing pattern to talk about in the first line. It happens in measure 3. And we have a slur here. This is the first slur we've had in our Suzuki book. But hopefully you have learned slurs before because this is a tricky song to do them for the first time. I'm going to play measure 3, and then I'll show you what I did with my bow. So notice how much bow I used for each of those notes. So how much bow you use really, really helps with your rhythm. I've said that before, but it's important to remember that. So I'm going on a down bow, then I'm going all the way to the tip on that first note. All right, so I go do, do, day, in a slur, do, day. Just like that. All right, I'm going to play the whole first line for you to put all of those bowing patterns together. 1, 2, 3, here I go. All right, so you notice, I'm going to play it one more time. And notice that my bow, whenever I have a quarter note, I'm using a full bow. Ready, and go. And when you're first learning this, you may need to break it down into smaller chunks. That is totally okay and normal. That's what most people have to do. All right, but I'm going to move on to the second line so we can go over some of the concepts that are there. It starts on measure 5. It starts with a hook bow again. So I'm just going to play through that line first. It ends in that C again. Make sure you aim that so it's nice and in tune. So we've got our hook bow to start. And then we have another bowing pattern like we had in measure 3. These notes look slightly different because all 4 of them are beamed together. But the bowing is the same. All right, and then that same bowing pattern comes back. 1, 2, 3. And you'll do a bow lift at the end of that second line there. So here's the second line one more time without talking. Here I go. 2, 3, bow lift. Write it in if your book doesn't have it. Now I'm going to do a playthrough of the first 2 lines kind of in slow motion. And remember, when you're practicing this, break it down into whatever chunks you need. It might be 1 measure at a time, it might be 2 measures at a time. But make sure that no matter how small a section you're doing, that you're focusing on how much bow you're using. So here I go from the beginning. 1, 2, 3, first 2 lines. Before I let you go, I want to make sure that I do a good transition between the first line and the second line. All right, so I'm going to do the last measure of the first line and go right on to the second. I'm just going to do those 2 measures just so you can hear how long that works. So ready and go. Alright, so I didn't pause in between the 2, even though I had a big jump from my G string all the way to my A string. So here's that last measure of the first line one more time. So I didn't rush it. I used a nice big full bow, but just know that my transition from the first to the second line stayed nice and steady. I'll make a separate video for the rest, but that is the first 2 lines of Minuet in C.